Lake Guatavita, Colombia. Believed to be the site of an ancient meteor crater, this circular-shaped mountain lake is at the center of one of mankind's greatest searches. The search for El Dorado, the lost city of gold. Since the 16th century, El Dorado has been the holy grail for fortune hunters. Legends abound about a place full of untold riches somewhere in South America. Yet to this day, the mythical city remains undiscovered. But if such a magnificent place does exist, how has it eluded explorers for centuries? Some believe the answer lies within this mysterious lake.
The story of El Dorado developed from the Lake Guatavita that was within the territory of the Muisca, or the Chibcha people, which was a chiefdom, not quite as high civilization as the Incas or as the Aztecs, but a chiefdom with civilization itself that had a lot of gold.
The ruler in the southern half of the Muisca territory was known as the Zipa, but the conquistadors who arrived there in the 16th century called him El Dorado, Spanish for the Golden One. They gave him this name after observing the Muisca's most sacred ritual. The Zipa would float out on a royal barge to the middle of Lake Guatavita to make offerings of gold to a god believed to live at the bottom of the lake.
It was said that the chief, adorned with resin and then adorned with gold dust, would jump into the water in order to wash the gold dust off, and that this gold would accumulate in that lake, and that golden objects as sacrifices would be thrown into that particular lake. And from that came the belief of El Dorado around Colombia.
In 1912, an excavation of Lake Guatavita was led by British engineer Hartley Knowles. Knowles reported that he had recovered around $20,000 worth of treasure, including golden artifacts. But he also believed much more lay beneath the hardened lake bed. Could Knowles' find be evidence that the story of the Muisca chief is based on truth? If so, just who or what was the so-called god who dwelled at the bottom of the lake?
A number of researchers have suggested that ancient aliens have come to Earth primarily to mine gold. Zecharia Sitchin suggested that these extraterrestrials needed gold to suspend in their atmosphere and preserve their planet.
Is gold something that's really important to space exploration and to astronomy? Well, it actually is very important, and the reason why is because gold is an inert material. It doesn't react with anything. The other thing that's very important about it is that it is a wonderful conductor of electricity. And last but not least is the fact that gold is a perfect reflector of infrared energy. You can use gold blankets to protect spacecraft against the intense heat of a star or any sort of heat source.
Gold is a very rare and valuable element throughout the universe.
Aliens coming to Earth searching for gold. Could such a thing be possible? According to ancient astronaut theorists, it is not only possible, but they claim the proof exists in the numerous texts and legends of the ancient world, like that of the legendary Incan city of Paititi, thought to be located near the southeastern area of Peru.
The conquistadors became obsessed with finding this mysterious city of gold that they've heard was in the jungles of eastern Peru somewhere. They called it Paititi, the Golden City. Stories of Paititi and El Dorado ultimately led to the exploration of the Amazon jungles.
El Dorado and Paititi are frequently confused. I see El Dorado as being that particular gold-producing site that was in northern South America, and Paititi having been another civilization contemporaneous with the Incas in the area of Peru, Bolivia, that is yet to be definitively found.
7,000 miles from Egypt, the dense jungles and rugged mountains of Colombia contain a vast number of archaeological sites. Many treasure hunters believe the legendary city of gold, El Dorado, lies hidden here, somewhere under a thick canopy of trees. While the mythical metropolis has never been found, early in the 20th century, tomb robbers searching along the Magdalena River stumbled upon a gravesite dating back 1,500 years to a pre-Columbian civilization known as the Tolima. Among the funerary objects found there were hundreds of small 2 to 3 inch gold figurines.
Many of those looked like insects and fish. However, out of those hundreds that they found, they also found about a dozen that are eerily reminiscent of modern-day fighter jets. They have a triangular shape, they have an upright tail fin, stabilizers, and a fuselage. And they have nothing in common with anything similar in nature.
Could these gold objects really be proof that Earth has been visited by ancient aliens?
One of the objects shows typical swept wings like with a modern aircraft, and if you compare it to something like a space shuttle, you see that the basic wing shape is very similar to wing shapes for high-speed aerodynamic bodies like a space shuttle is.
There is not a single insect in the world which has got its wings at the bottom. Now, when you exclude the possibility that it's an insect, one of the things which remain is the fact that this is actually, yes, what it looks like, a plane.
In 1997, German aviation experts including Algund Inboom and Peter Belting set out to prove the speculation by building a scale model replica of the Gold Flyer, fully equipped with landing gear and a working engine.
It was rather simple because we don't need to put much parts to this shape because this shape is perfect. Everything was already done by the native people 2,000 years ago.
They did not add an inch or remove an inch. They just essentially blew the little thing into a larger size. I mean, this is sensational that pre-Columbian culture knew about aerodynamics.
Once completed, the remote-controlled flyer took off down a makeshift runway and flew.
When you see this thing taking off, you really feel that this is the real deal.
It was a very successful test and showed us how perfect ancient people were working out aerodynamic design. What shows you that there must be something happened. We are not quite sure how it did, but that it did.
This is applied science. This isn't just thinking somewhere. This is people going out there and making sure and proving with eyes to see, anybody can see this, that this is real, this is genuine. This little thing which sits in a museum could fly.
Uzengeli, Turkey, 1997. After years of research, American explorer David Allen Deal has become convinced that the biblical story of Noah is, in fact, historical, and is on the hunt to find the remnants of the Ark. At an elevation of more than 7,000 feet near Mount Ararat, where the Bible says Noah's Ark eventually landed, he stumbles upon the ruins of an ancient settlement.
What he discovered is what's known as the lost city of Noah or Nashua.
The ancient Armenian historian Moses of Horon identified Nashwan as the place of Noah's first descent. Could this be the first settlement in a post-flood world? A recent archaeological dig reportedly uncovered something remarkable. The region may contain millions of graves.
Because Noah's tomb is said to be here, a huge cemetery has grown up around this lost city of Noah, and people from all over the Middle East in ancient times insisted on being buried in this area.
Researchers suggest that Nashwan is just one of many points of evidence that support the notion of a historical Great Flood.
What we now know from incredible amount of evidence coming from every part of the world is that around 10,800 BC, the world was devastated by some kind of impact event. And this devastated every part of the landscape. What today we might refer to as a nuclear winter that blotted out the sun, the moon, and the stars.
There's something called the Uccello horizon that's been found all over the world. It's like a layer of black ash. This suggests there was a great conflagration that took place, great fires and burning, and it left this layer all around the world, and it dates to between 11,000 and 13,000 years ago. So this does suggest something very serious took place at this time.
Could this layer of ash, found roughly 50 feet deep in the Earth's soil, be evidence of a devastating global event? According to geologist Dr. Robert Schock, a worldwide cataclysm and the resulting layer of ash was likely created by a solar flare, a sudden flash of increased brightness on the sun.
Based on my analysis of the evidence, is that there was a major solar outburst. The sun essentially erupted. This caused in a flash the glaciers to melt virtually instantaneously. It caused evaporation of water. This not only led to the rising sea levels, flooding the coastal areas, and torrential rains. We have physical evidence of this in the geological record.
The island of Pohnpei, more than 2,500 miles southwest of Hawaii, completely isolated in the Pacific Ocean. This Micronesian landmass is home to just 34,000 people, mainly farmers and fishermen. But there is one area of the island that is completely uninhabited: the lost city of Madol. The native islanders believe this ancient site is cursed. And it is also home to some of the most mysterious archaeological ruins in the world. Built on a coral reef just off the eastern coast of Pohnpei and sprawling more than 200 acres, Madol consists of 92 smaller man-made islands connected by canals. According to historians, this ancient city, often called the Venice of the Pacific, was the capital of the Saudeleur dynasty that ruled from about 500 to 1628 AD.
This ancient city housed the Saudeleurs, the kings of that time. So it has their houses, it has feasting areas, it has tombs. So there's a whole number of areas that each of these islets supported.
Most archaeologists agree that construction of these artificial islands began sometime in the 13th century. Each has been formed with columnar basalt, a black rock that forms when basaltic lava from a volcano cools in the form of columns.
There are a number of columnar basalt outflows across Pohnpei itself, and we know of several of these outcrops that were used to mine the basalt. They were then transported to the area of Madol and then placed to create these small islets.
But how did the native people living here 800 years ago manage to build 92 islets out of giant basalt columns? Researchers estimate that each stone log used to construct the megalithic structures weighs between 5 to 50 tons, stacked to form walls as high as 25 feet tall and 17 feet thick. Archaeologists believe that it was an undertaking that most likely would have required all 25,000 island inhabitants to complete.
Around the ruins of Madol are many canals, which researchers and archaeologists say were the routes taken by boats to move these basalt columns across and around the island to construct the huge megalithic site.
Mainstream scholars insist native people built Madol using ropes, rollers, and rafts. But attempts to prove this theory have failed.
So if you add up all of the stone logs, you have a weight of 750,000 or so metric tons. That's a lot. If you were to move maybe 2,000 tons a year, you might be able to get it built over about 3 centuries. We're talking about a major, massive effort here. The kind of effort that you would see in the construction of the pyramids in Egypt.
But could there be another explanation for how these ancient people were able to move such massive rocks miles across the island and into place in the ocean without the help of modern machinery? According to local legends, the ancient builders used a much more profound method of construction, an advanced anti-gravitational technology that ancient astronaut theorists believe may explain many of the world's mysterious megalithic sites.
Some legends state that the stones were actually flown from one part of the island to another, or levitated some way to get them up to such high areas of the main construction.
This is very reminiscent of what researchers call auditive levitation, which was a technique of raising heavy stones by matching the sound frequency of matter, rendering it weightless and moving it into place.
The people themselves, who still to this day live there in Pohnpei, say that this place was not built by us. It's been here before we arrived. And they themselves say that basalt blocks were moved as if by ghost hand. That is why the natives call Madol also the city of ghosts.
Washington, D.C., the National Institute of Health. Here, in 1990, scientists began the Human Genome Project to identify every gene in the human body and determine what makes up our DNA. This scientific breakthrough may allow us to manipulate human evolution and alter the human race. But is it possible, when we have become masters of human evolution, that we may finally understand the true nature of gray aliens?
When you look at the physiology of what we think the grays are, okay, large head, huge wraparound eyes, spindly body, you have to ask yourself, does this make sense? in an evolutionary sense? And the answer is no, but does it make sense if these beings are bioengineered? And the answer to that is yes. That's what the Greys really, I think, most realistically are.
I believe that extraterrestrials found on this planet a species that they were able to change the genetic code that would allow them to interact and secure the longevity of their species. We're the product of that. We're the genetic carrier, if you will. One of the reasons why they're still abducting us. That tweaking of the genetic code is still going on. The Greys are our space brothers. I don't think they're necessarily evil. We're an ends to a means.
Could extraterrestrials have bred with humans? You sort of need two things to have happened. One is the life form would have had to be carbon-based like us, presumably, because the chemistry has to work. The second thing is you would need basically the same genetic type structure. So you could imagine if there was another planet with fairly similar conditions that gave carbon-based life forms, what would evolve, there is a good likelihood that you would get species like us. And if they were close enough, then of course they could interbreed with humans on Earth.
Why would they be creating a hybrid being? Is there something that's going to happen here on Earth where our genetic makeup maybe won't be able to survive some type of solar activity or something that needs to genetically modify us so that we can still survive? Is it for our own good as humans, or are they doing it for their need as aliens?
If gray aliens interbred with humans, might their biology and appearance be a reflection of their more advanced evolution as a species? And if so, might they provide a hint of what humans may look like in the distant future?
Even though the Greys kind of look very different to us, you know, the larger heads, the smaller bodies, the big black eyes, in terms of evolution, you need hands, you need fingers and thumbs. You need eyes, you need ears, you need a mouth, you need to be able to communicate. Because you would need that type of form to really advance yourself as a civilization.
When you're a super technologically advanced race, you don't really need big muscles. You don't really need sex organs if you're being genetically engineered, biologically and cybernetically, most likely, to function in the capacity that they do here. A super large head, for example, houses a hell of a large brain, easily their greatest asset. It's a brain that allows them to have a cognitive capacity probably vastly beyond what we're able to have. It's a brain that allows them, most likely, to have telepathic capabilities that are beyond the capability of most humans.
I tend to subscribe to the theory that we are in their image. Sounds like the book of Genesis, doesn't it? But it's very possible that ETs, who look like we do, or should I say we look like they do, came here, did a little manipulation, genetically altered what was here on the planet, created the Adam and Eve, turned it into modern man, and then left for whatever reason.
There is a missing link. The missing link is ET. They've changed our genetic code eons ago, and through a process of evolution, you have the human development to the point where we're going into space. Our evolutionary process is a direct result of genetic manipulation by ET.
Winchester, England, August 15th, 2002. A crop formation bearing the image of what appears to be a gray alien emerges in a wheat field. At the bottom right corner of the image is a disc-shaped object containing what some believe to be binary code, a computer language consisting of ones and zeros.
There was a crop formation that unmistakably looks like an extraterrestrial, the proverbial gray with the almond eyes and the triangular-shaped head. And there's also at the bottom, there seems to be a computer disk and what looked like binary code. The message allegedly says, "Beware the bearers of false gifts and their broken promises. Much pain, but still time. There is good out there. We oppose deceivers. Conduit closing."
It was warning humanity about the deceivers, about dangers.
Just a year prior, on August 21st, 2001, another formation that contained binary code appeared in a wheat field next to the Chilbolton Radio Observatory. Researchers are convinced that the design was a response to a message that was transmitted into space by astronomers Frank Drake and Carl Sagan in 1974.
In November of 1974, Carl Sagan and Drake at Cornell University sent out from Arecibo, Puerto Rico, a signal of binary code about Earth to whoever in the cosmos would receive our signal.
The original message contained binary encoded information, including the numbers 1 through 10, an image of our DNA strand, the figure of a human, and a graphic of the solar system with the position of Earth highlighted.
It echoed absolutely, line by line by line. But the DNA did not look like double helix. It was very bizarre. And then when you got down, instead of a 6-foot human, it was this thing that was maybe a third the height of the human in Carl Sagan, and it was associated with a strange solar system. It was a very complex, very strange, one-of-a-kind pattern. We'd never seen anything like it before.
In 2004, a mysterious rock was found near the Roswell crash site, bearing the same image as a crop circle that was discovered in Chiselden, England, on August 2nd, 1996.
On the Roswell rock, you have an almost identical symbol in England. To me, it's very fascinating because it essentially shows that they're trying to somehow communicate with us. So the idea is that perhaps some of these crop circles indeed are messages from elsewhere. And elsewhere, in my opinion, means of extraterrestrial origin.
June 2013. In an article for Forbes, graphic artist and researcher Nicolai Lamb illustrates just how the human face might change over the next 100,000 years. With the help of a computational biologist and taking into account future technological, environmental, and genetic influences, he came up with eerie renderings that show an increasingly large cranium with a pronounced forehead, huge eyes, and more pigmented skin tone.
As far as the future, it's always really hard to predict, especially in terms of Homo sapiens sapiens, because we've been so good at modifying our environment through our technology. So if you're trying to think about what we might look like in the future, again, it's a bit hard because we don't exactly know what these environmental pressures may be on us right now.
While Lamb's work was dismissed by some scientists as conjecture, anthropologists have found that humanity has changed greatly over the past 200,000 years. Homo sapiens have developed more delicate skeletons, smaller faces, and more pointed chins. And recent studies have shown the human body is still undergoing significant changes.
So over the last 40 to 50,000 years, tooth sizes have reduced very, very dramatically. And this is largely the product of expansion of both cooking and ultimately the development of pottery. these cultural innovations for changing what we eat and how we eat led to dramatic declines in how large our jaws were and ultimately what our tooth sizes look like. The future direction of human evolution is difficult to chart, but certainly we would think that some continued expansion of brain size may be something that we're going to continue to see as we move forward in human evolution.
In 2012, scientists from the University of Tennessee announced findings that show that human skull size has also increased dramatically just since the late 1800s.
What they found is totally amazing. The average height of the skull increased by an astonishing 8 millimeters, or almost 0.3 inches. The actual increase in brain volume caused by this height change is 200 cubic centimeters, which is the size of a tennis ball. Our jaws are becoming longer and narrower, and the size of the head is becoming bigger. Well, this starts to sound pretty familiar, doesn't it?
Ancient astronaut theorists speculate that extended space travel may also lead us to appear more like the Greys in the distant future.
Some have suggested that the reason why the Greys have these what appear to be atrophied bodies is because that over time their bodies changed. They too at some point had larger muscles, but because they became space travelers, their muscles atrophied.
When you go to space, you don't have that pressure pushing down on you, so those muscles aren't used. And so you lose muscle very rapidly. Also associated with that, your bones begin to atrophy. We're talking about longer and longer missions out into space, going to Mars, going farther. And so astronauts will be subjected to these stresses for a long period of time.
Is it possible that the gray aliens at one time looked more like us when they were planet-bound? And so we're on that same track. And we are becoming more and more like these gray aliens themselves.
Rome, Italy, November 6th, 2014. Vatican officials announce a pastoral emergency due to a rise in occult activity, such as the use of Ouija boards and seances. They caution that the spiritual realm is very real and that these games may have unintended consequences. Similar warnings concerning the danger of trying to summon dark forces can be found throughout history. And in 1918, the infamous occultist Aleister Crowley claimed to be in contact with a dark entity that he was actually able to put a face to.
Aleister Crowley conducted some rituals in which he came into contact with a being called Lamb. He believed this was, as he called it, an interdimensional being, but he never wrote anything about Lamb, which is curious because he wrote a great deal about some of his other rituals. It could be that it frightened him and he didn't want to encourage other people to go down that stage.
What was he looking at? Where did that creature come from? Who knows? But it doesn't look human. It looks more extraterrestrial.
Lamb looks very much like a gray alien, and in some ways, he looks like one of the Otnus, like Akhenaten, or their children with large extended heads. So you have to ask yourself, is this Lamb actually some gray alien who's appeared to Crowley? And have these gray aliens appeared throughout history?
Is it possible that through his ritual practices, Aleister Crowley made contact with an extraterrestrial entity called Lamb? Some ancient astronaut theorists say yes, and claim further evidence can be found by examining the magical rituals that coincided with the beginning of the age of UFOs. Pasadena, California, 1946. In a mansion on Millionaire's Row, rocket scientist and founder of Jet Propulsion Laboratories, Jack Parsons, and Scientology founder L. Ron Hubbard dabble in the magical rituals of Aleister Crowley.
Jack Parsons is arguably the most controversial and strange figure in the history of the American space program. He found out about the work of Aleister Crowley and the secret society known as OTO, or Ordo Templi Orientis. And Parsons got very interested in what you could essentially call black magic and Satanism. Then comes along the science fiction writer L. Ron Hubbard. L. Ron Hubbard moved in with Jack Parsons, and together they started to do this elaborate magical ceremony.
Between January and March 1946, Jack Parsons and Ron Hubbard were conducting these rituals. Crowley certainly didn't authorize them to do the rituals. The one thing he did say, he was to advise people not to do his rituals unless they were properly prepared. He was not happy with them doing them.
Some ancient astronaut theorists suggest that by conducting the rituals without understanding the consequences, Hubbard and Parsons inadvertently ushered in the UFO age.
Apparently the same latitude line of Pasadena, California, if you take it all the way around the Earth, you got the Roswell crash, which happens the very next year, 1947, and many other UFO sightings and crashes that took place all over the world. It was as if Parsons and Hubbard were walking alongside a tarp that was hanging down vertically, and they had a box cutter knife and slit holes in the tarp. And these holes become like portals that allow extraterrestrials to get in.
I think that Hubbard and Parsons dabbled in things that they shouldn't have dabbled with. There are a lot of experts out there that think that demonic forces are indeed extraterrestrials. So who knows what the two of them mixed and conjured up, but there was always talk that the two of them were big into UFOs and very strange things like that. And they may have opened up a doorway, a portal, to get all these things through.